This is a very hard question. Pretty much everyone gets it wrong because it's such like a weird situation. However, we should know going in that we need to think about sentence structure. It's remarkably easy here to predict the question because we can see in the answer choices the punctuation is the only thing changing. And so if we know it's about punctuation, we know it's about sentence structure, right? We don't hear punctuation, so we need rules about how sentences are built to know which punctuation marks are correct. So we've got two kinds of punctuation marks here. We have hard or big punctuation marks, things like periods and colons. And these are ways of separating things that are kind of like complete sentences. Okay, so we have certain kinds of things that can come before and after them. Then we have weak punctuation marks like commas. Okay, so commas are used for lots of purposes, but mostly we use a comma when we have a smaller interruption or a weaker change in the sentence structure, right? So usually we're adding on some extra information. So we need to think about all that as we sort through this. The first rules that I would consider are about the hard punctuation marks, the ones that we would need complete sentences for. Because if we don't have complete sentences, we can't use them. So this is really tricky. The real question comes down to this. This part, the beginning, take Bartlett pairs. Is that a sentence? Well, it's only 3 words, and there's a lot of stuff after it. And I know that, we tend to think of sentences as long, and so if we compare that highlighted part to everything that comes after it, we'd be like, no, of course it's not a sentence. This other thing is a sentence. This other thing is super long. However, this is a sentence, and it's a special kind of sentence, and so it doesn't follow the normal rules that we see on the SAT. Normally, a sentence is very simple. It has a subject, the dog, and it has a verb, barks. And then it has punctuation, a period or a semicolon or a colon if we want to keep going, but that's a sentence. We can add extra things on top of it, but that's essentially what we need. Now, we definitely have a verb here. We have the verb take. Okay, that's an action, right? You take something. And it seems like we have a noun, right? We have a subject, Bartlett pears. But if we think about it, that's a little bit of a weird thing because we want the subject of the sentence to be the thing doing the action, right? The dog is doing the barking, okay? In this case, the pears are not doing the taking. That doesn't make sense, right? If anything, they're the receiving the taking, right? They're being taken. And so then we don't have a subject, it would seem, and so that is a problem, and then therefore this can't be a sentence. Except we kind of do have a subject, and this is so weird. I hate that they're doing this, but this sentence is a command, and so the subject is kind of implied. The subject here is you, okay? You take the Bartlett pears, okay? And that sounds weird, because it is weird. We wouldn't say it. We would just say take Bartlett pears. And when we say take here, we don't also mean like physically take them. We mean like consider them. Consider Bartlett pears, okay? And we're supposed to consider them as an example, for instance, okay? So, I get this is so confusing, but the point I'm trying to make here is we can't use commas because that's a sentence. And so is the thing that comes after it. Unless they are treated with exactly the right amount of 1 MCP at exactly the right time, here's the way the sentence really starts, they will remain hard and green until they rot. And consumers who experience this will be unlikely to purchase them again. So that is absolutely, I mean, it's long, but it's absolutely a sentence. It has a subject and a verb. Let me do the highlighting here. So subjects are going to be they, and then verb here is remain. And then we have the word and which is very special. That's going to be a conjunction that lets us actually add a second sentence on. So it's not just one sentence, it's two. The consumers I'm almost losing the verb, who experience this will be unlikely to purchase them again. So yeah, grammar's confusing, and that's why I try to stay away from it as long as possible and as much as possible. But here we're kind of stuck thinking about it. And so the answer to this question ends up being something that I don't think any of us would ever pick. It's B. And so the reason, though, has to do with the rules that we know for colons, right? So for a colon, we need to have a complete sentence before the colon. Let's do this. A complete sentence before the colon, and then afterwards we can have lots of different things. We could have a sentence, we could have a list, that's what most people associate with them, or we could even have one word. And so because we have those options, that part doesn't really matter as much. What matters is the thing before. And as I said, the piece before is a sentence. Take Bartlett pears, for instance. The stylistic thing that we need to think about with colons is that the part after usually answers or explains a question. Not a literal question, but a question that's implied by the first sentence. So in this case, here's what's happening. Take Bartlett pears, for instance. Think of them as an example. Why should I think of them as an example? Because unless they are treated with exactly the right amount of 1-MCP at exactly the right time, they will remain hard and green until they rot, and consumers who experience this will be unlikely to purchase them again. This is a totally valid use of the colon. This is a good use of it, right? It's explaining something that comes before it. Why should we think about Bartlett pears? What's so special about them? Well, they have to do with this 1-MCP chemical. So yeah. Now I'm going to quickly, if you were already bored of this and confused, you could probably just move on. This is not a high priority question, but if you're curious about why the other choices are wrong, the easiest thing for me to say is that A and C are going to be run-ons because they're using only commas to connect these two complete sentences. One of them is a short command, but it is a sentence, and so we cannot use these weaker punctuation marks like commas to just join two sentences. That's not enough. We need more. And so maybe a conjunction, something like and would be good, but we can't just use a comma. The problem with D is that it takes this for instance part and puts it in the wrong place. The for instance is about the pears. So if we put a period there, we're separating it from the thing that it's supposed to be for instancing, okay? So it's breaking the sentence apart in a grammatically correct way, but it's not putting the right clauses with the right pieces. We need the for instance to go with the thing that's about to be our for instance, our example. So that's a little weird because normally we think of for instance as something that begins a sentence, not something that ends it. But it's a phrase. It can move around. It doesn't matter. It has lots of places it can go. It's just an extra clause. It's just got to be extra in the right place. And so B ends up weirdly being the right answer. And I think it's unlikely you will see something this weird again, or like weird in this way. But the SAT really does, with punctuation, love to kind of like push the envelope a little bit and challenge you. And so the more we have these rules down about how things work, the more that we can think about punctuation when we're supposed to and sentence structure when we're supposed to, the more we'll be able to adapt to these really weird situations and get our brain on the right track to think about them. It's really hard, but with practice, you can get stuff like this.